So we are going to continue, surprise, surprise, with where we left off yesterday. And yesterday we had a look at the sutta called Streams or Overflowings, I think was the Bhante Sujato's translation, which is actually very nice. And so for those of you, for those who are watching this from afar, we are looking at a number of suttas on the idea of freedom and liberation and release and these kind of things, and what that means on the Buddhist path, what it means, what we are released from, what are the different kinds of liberation or freedom on the path. And then later on this retreat we're going to look at the actual practices that lead to that. So today we're going to look at a nice little sutta which is found in the Atthakavagga. The Atthakavagga is part of the Sutta Nipata, part of the Khuddaka Nikaya. So this is the fourth chapter of the Khuddaka Nikaya, Sutta number 15, the Attadanda Sutta in Pali. And this sutta is really about the condition of the world, what the world is like, and how the world is kind of the problems of the world, and why it is useful to seek freedom from that world. What are the issues with that world? So this is what this sutta is about, and it really concerns the Buddha before his awakening, the Buddha to be, how he looked upon the world and then decided that based on that he's going to seek an escape from all of this and seek the awakening itself. That's kind of the idea here. So Attadanda Sutta, taking up of arms. Attadanda, danda means like punishment, or actually the root meaning is like stick. So stick also means punishment. Danda also means like weapons. Weapons, stick, punishment. So in other words, kind of is a metaphor for violence in a sense. Violence and discord and conflict and all of these kind of things is what danda really points towards. And atta here means the taking up. So the taking up of violence, in other words, instigating and starting violence and these kind of things. That is the meaning. Atta does not mean a self. The self-punishment, otherwise it becomes self-punishment if attadanda. This does not mean that. It means taking up of conflict and punishment and arms and these kind of things. So this is how the Buddha reflected before his awakening. This is what made him go forth to decide to become a monk, etc., etc. So this is how this sutta reads. It's all in verse. So I'll just read it out and then come back to the various bits and pieces in a second. So this is again Bhante Sujato's translations. Peril stems from those who take up arms. Just look at people in conflict. I shall extol how I came to be stirred with a sense of urgency. I saw this population flounder like a fish in a little puddle. Seeing them fight each other, fear came upon me. The world around was hollow, all directions were in turmoil. Wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. But even in the settlement they fight. Seeing that, I grew uneasy. When I saw a dart there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. When struck by that dart, you run about in all directions. But when that same dart has been plucked out, you neither run about nor sink down. So that is the beginning of that sutta. It goes on much longer. This is like the appearance, if you like, of right view. The right view is about looking upon the world in the right way with clarity, not kind of trying to hide the reality of the way things are. And then once you have that right view, well, from that comes the practice. Then you practice. The next part of these verses, which we will have a look at later on, they concern how the practice happens. And the last part of these verses is then the result of the practice, which is basically the arahant, or the fully awakened awakened person. So it has kind of three structures like this: right view, practice, and then results. And this is kind of how the Dhamma very often is explicated or explained in the suttas. So what is this right view that the Buddha is talking about here? What is actually going on here? So he starts off by saying that peril stems from those who take up arms. Peril here, bhaya can mean danger, it can mean fear. Fear comes from those who take up arms, danger comes from those who take up arms. Not just arms, but punishment or sticks and all of these kind of things. You can say fear stems from those who take up violence. This is another way of saying this. Danda means like violence. We are fearful of violence. No one really wants violence in this world. And so it is natural. That's where fear and danger comes from in society. So and then it says, just look at people in conflict. The idea of seeing the conflict of the world, then you see the danger in these things. So let's just... so any kind of conflict that you have. Based on that, the Buddha then, or the Buddha to be rather, he gets this sense of urgency. There's something urgently that needs to be escaped from. When you see the danger, it is very clear the danger is coming. It's like you see the tanks rolling in. Then you get a sense of urgency. You better run away because those tanks are very heavy and very dangerous. You can imagine if you were in Ukraine and you saw the Russian tanks kind of coming towards your border. You think, whoa, okay, now is the time to kind of to probably move away from here or whatever. That you get the sense of urgency. But sometimes it's like you need to see those tanks before you really believe it. Then you really believe, okay, well, this is really real. But we shouldn't wait for those tanks to come. We shouldn't wait for everything to go wrong before we get that sense of urgency. We need to imagine, we need to know that the tanks are always coming. The tanks are always on the border. They're always waiting to enter our lives in one way or another. The tanks here is just a metaphor for all the problems and all the conflicts and all the issues in the world. We shouldn't wait for Australia to go to war. It's enough. We see Ukraine go to war. Okay, well then we know it can happen in Australia as well. It can happen everywhere. That's kind of the issue here. So you gain the sense of urgency because you understand the deeper nature of what the world is like. So then he says, I saw the population flounder. Flounder here is this word which means to like flap about or to tremble or to, trembling is actually one good translation for this word. So you see the whole population kind of tremble and flounder and flap around like a fish in a little puddle. A fish in a small puddle. We don't see that very often, but if you see, you can see the fish kind of floundering and flapping and kind of trying to escape from the inescapable. And to me, the world is a little bit like a little puddle. The whole world, there is really no escape from the way the world is. You can travel wherever you like in the world. You can travel to, whatever part you want. And human nature is basically the same everywhere. Human nature, there's many good things to be said about human nature. There's many noble qualities in human beings, but human beings also have the dark side. You have the defilements, the ill will, the hatred and delusion. And also, of course, you have the compassion and kindness. So humans are very complex beings, but the dark side is always there. You can never really escape the dark side by traveling somewhere else, going to this part of the world. Going maybe Antarctica, you can get away a little bit, but it's not such a nice place to hang out. Antarctica, you kind of get fed up after a while, and then you realize that even Antarctica, probably the penguins are fighting each other, right? So even then you can't really escape it, because it's always the same. The nature of animals and humans are the same. Actually, animals are far more brutal than humans. It's a good thing they don't have weapons. We'd be in serious trouble if they had weapons. So there's nowhere to go. It's like a small puddle. We're all flapping around, floundering around in this small puddle together, trembling in the world because of the problems, the conflict is everywhere. You can't really escape it in this world. If you want to escape from conflict fully, completely, you have to go in a different direction. You have to go inwards rather than outwards. You have to go into the mind. You have to find an escape within. That is where the escape is found. That is where you find freedom. Not in the world, but out of the world. Seeing them at odds with each other, fear came upon me. Bhaya again, the word bhaya. When you see the hostility and seeing the problems and the conflict in the world, being at odds here is really just conflict in the world. When you see that, the Buddha to be says fear came upon him. The Buddha to be is like the most spiritually developed person in human history. He hasn't become the Buddha yet, but obviously has very powerful spiritual qualities from the past. That's kind of what enables him to become the Buddha. He becomes fearful. The person with so many good spiritual qualities. And if he becomes fearful, then we also have a good reason to be a bit fearful. Open our eyes to see what is going on. And of course that is one of the advantages sometimes of living at a time when there is a bit of trouble in the world. And these days you see the news and you kind of see, wow, what's happening in the world? You wonder what's going on. And that is a positive thing if we use it in a good way, because it encourages us to see the reality behind the facade. The facade may be nice, the facade may be good, you got many years, everything seems to be great, but actually it's just a facade. It's just a temporary kind of temporary stability, but nothing is ever stable. This is the whole idea of anicca, of uncertainty and unreliability. And when the facade is nice, when everything seems to be okay, we become complacent. We become stupid when that happens. We forget the reality of things. So in one way, we have an advantage right now when the world is unstable, because now it's in our face. We have no choice but to face this. There's no point in sticking our head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. Sticking your head in the sand is what the ostriches do. They put the head in the sand. So don't be an ostrich, because that's not advisable. And so now we have the opportunity to see the world for what it is. So this is kind of good, positive, as long as you also develop the happiness of the path. Because if we only develop the kind of negative side, you can get very depressed. So you have to develop the positive side, the joy in the world. So when you have the joy and then you see the reality of the world, well, then these two things, they work together to kind of make the path work for you, even, to speed up the path, if you like. Things go more quickly because you have the good qualities and then you have the right view on the other hand. The two things kind of going together in this way here. So so don't miss. So we have an opportunity. Everything is an opportunity in Buddhism. Every dukkha is an opportunity for insight, for understanding, for right view, for leaning in the right direction, leaning towards the spiritual path. So even the Buddha to be, had this fear when he saw the conflict in the world. Everyone is in conflict. The world around was volatile. All directions were in turmoil. There's some different translations here. I think turmoil, what are the, let's have a quick look. So this, I think there's a more recent translation that he has. It's here somewhere. All around was volatile, that's right. And before he had all was insubstantial, hollow, I think he had before. So the whole world is hollow. Or insubstantial or volatile. The Pali word is asara, which literally means without essence. So I'm not sure why he has volatile there. He has changed that from hollow. To me, the word asara basically means hollow or insubstantial. Not sure why he has changed it to volatile. No doubt he has his reasons, but I'm not sure why that is. But the idea of, to me anyway, of hollow and insubstantial is very meaningful, because that is what the Buddha is always talking about. The world is kind of empty of essence, empty of any way you can take your stand, empty of anything you can hold on to. This is why attachment is so dangerous in the world, because the moment you attach, the thing that you attach to is hollow, insubstantial. It is not something that will be there for you when you need it. So we grasp onto things that are inherently ungraspable because they will not be there when you need them. And this is kind of one of the main reasons for dukkha in the world. The grasping, the attaching, the holding on to things that should never be held on to because they are so unstable and so uncertain. So all directions, where does it go again? The world around was hollow. All directions, everything is volatile. There's nothing to hold on to. Whenever you take a stand somewhere, taking a stand is like attaching to something. Okay, I can rest, I can stand here. The ground is safe. The ground is never safe. There's always an earthquake around the corner. The earthquake here is a metaphor or a simile for the instability of the world, the uncertainty of the world. There's always a little bit of instability. It's like there's always a low-level tremors in the world, right? And suddenly the big tremor comes, the major uncertainty, the big anicca, and the whole world shakes. And you have taken a stand on that ground. And because you have taken a stand on that ground, you're going to fall over when the whole world shakes, and everything is going, and boom, you fall over. That is anicca. When you fall over, you hurt. Impermanence, unreliability, always a little bit out of sight. We always think we are safe. We blind ourselves to the reality of the world. We don't want to deal with it. It's too painful to recognize what the world actually is like. But when we do recognize it, if we use it wisely, it becomes a motivation to live in the right way and to get out of this problem. So actually, it is a beautiful thing in the larger picture of things. You see how so many people in the world are experiencing all kind of mental problems these days. They get depressed and sad because the world seems to be going in the wrong way, and we spend too much time on social media and what have you. TikTok should be banned straight away, and Facebook as well probably, and many of these things. These are dangerous stuff, and they make you more stupid. It's true, right? These things make us stupid. It's kind of really problematic. But regardless, people get depressed and sad because they see what's happening around the world, and there is no way out. They don't have a solution. The world is their refuge. The world is where they find their happiness. The world is where they find meaning. The world is important to them. And because the world is their refuge and that world is collapsing, it's kind of terrible. That's why people get upset. And so they hide, they kind of put their head in the sand. They don't want to see what's going on. They stop watching the news, or either that or they get fake news or whatever. There's so many issues going on. It's so hard to kind of find your way sometimes in this world. And you don't refuse to see what's going on. But from a Buddhist point of view, actually, it is not so sad. It is an opportunity to open our eyes. It's an opportunity to be honest about the reality of the world. And that has a very beautiful effect, because we have the Dhamma. You have an alternative. We have a refuge somewhere else. We don't need to rely on the world for our happiness. The Dhamma should be our source of happiness, our source of refuge, our source of meaning. And then even if the world goes completely to the dogs, I don't want to give the kind of poor dogs that inherit the world, but even if it goes completely to the dogs, it's actually okay, because we know that our future is not dependent on where the world goes. Our future is dependent on how we live. That's the Buddhist idea. If we live well, we become resilient. If we live well, we have an inner source of happiness. If we live well, we get a good rebirth regardless of what happens to this planet. So that is kind of where our refuge is in the Dhamma. And so our future is certain regardless. Okay, so it is not nice to see so much suffering in the world. It's quite terrible. But then the message of the Dhamma becomes also all the more interesting to the world. It becomes more plausible to teach these teachings, more likely that people will understand them and take them on board. Because here is an actual solution. And it's a wonderful solution. Not only does it solve all the problems in the world, it solves all the problems in your personal life. It solves absolutely everything, and it leads to something much higher. So it becomes the beginning of a solution to all problems and a movement towards all happiness. That is the promise. If we just face up to the problems of the world, it actually leads to something much higher, something much more interesting. And that's a very hopeful message right there. So sometimes facing up to reality, having a right view, is fundamentally important if we are going to be able to make an escape from the problems. So the world everywhere is hollow or volatile. All directions are in turmoil. Wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. The idea of a home is like a place of refuge. This is why we have houses. We have a house because when you go into a house, that's your refuge. This is where I live. You lock your front door and then you go to bed and you sleep at night safely in your home and you have your entertainment. That's where you eat. Homes are like a place of refuge. That's kind of the purpose of them. And so what he's saying here, there is no refuge in the world. Just like I was saying before. This is what he's saying here. Why is there no refuge in the world? Because there's nowhere unsettled. Nowhere unsettled here. The meaning here seems to be nowhere is unsettled by the problems that exist in the world. There's problems everywhere. There isn't really any refuge in your home. If you think that you are safe in your home, then one day you're not safe. Bushfire comes, burns it up. The burglar comes and enters your house. That's kind of terrible because we want to feel safe in our houses. And then if a burglar comes, you don't really feel that safety anymore afterwards. So that also is a kind of wake-up call. There isn't actually any real home anywhere. There is no way you can escape from these things because it's all affected by the anicca, the impermanence, the unreliability, the uncertainty, the dukkha, the calamity of the world. It's all there. And so for this reason, there is that escape doesn't really exist. Escape is only found on the spiritual path. So there's nowhere unsettled. But even if you try to settle, even in the settlement, if you try to settle somewhere, you are still at odds with other people who have settled. So that settlement doesn't work. The conflict carries on. And seeing that, I grew uneasy. Arati. Arati, I think the Pali word is here. Arati means you are dissatisfied. You want to get out of there. You've had enough of all of this. You want to leave it all behind. You grew uneasy. And then, as you grew uneasy, you saw a dart right there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. Here you're starting to see the solution or the cause of the problem. There's a dart right there, stuck in the heart, so hard to see. And of course that dart is the dart of craving, is the main thing that dart concerns. That dart is the problem. That dart is the issue. That dart keeps the world going. That dart makes you attached to the worldly phenomena that are so uncertain and unstable. Very hard to see that dart because it's such a subtle thing. A lot of our craving is craving to existence. It's kind of subtle, these things. And especially because of the sense of self, blinds our ability to see what actually is truly going on. Very, very hard to see this dart. But before I talk a little bit more about that dart, which I will do in a second, first of all, it's kind of interesting to contemplate a little bit more about this idea of violence in the world. Why is there violence in the world? And I mentioned recently, I think I mentioned this at my talk at Buddha Loka Center just before I came here. There's a beautiful sutta where the Buddha talks about why there is violence in the world. And this is in the Sakkapanya Sutta, the questions of Sakka. Sakka, of course, the Lord of the Devas. Sakka comes to the Buddha and he asks the Buddha, can I please ask some questions of you? Actually, Sakka doesn't really dare to come down. Sakka is too shy to meet the Buddha. It's kind of cute, isn't it? This is the Lord of the gods, the most powerful being you can imagine. But he's a little bit shy when it comes to see the Buddha. So he doesn't really go down. He doesn't dare to go directly to the Buddha. And so what he does, he sends a messenger down to the Buddha. This messenger is called Panchasika, 5 instrument. And it's Gandhava. Gandhava are the heavenly musicians. Yeah, so that's if you want to see the Buddha, you send down a heavenly musician first. Yeah, so we send some musicians down. They can play a nice song. Any musicians here? We can send you down if the Buddha comes around, and we can kind of get the attention of the Buddha. So he sends down Panchasika and says, "Oh, please get the attention of the Buddha and ask if I would like to ask a question. Yeah, see if that's going to be possible." And so he sends this heavenly musician down, and this Gandhava, completely clueless, obviously got no idea what is appropriate, not appropriate. He sings a love song to the Buddha. How can I sing a love song to the Buddha? It's kind of really weird. And he says things, just like, just like the Arahants love the Dhamma, so I love this beautiful girl, or something like that. It's very, very curious, a very strange kind of thing. And that's kind of what makes me think maybe it's real, because people often are clueless. We don't really, if you're not a Buddhist, maybe the Gandhava probably wasn't a Buddhist, or maybe was a little bit Buddhist but didn't have much of a clue. So you do things like that, you do weird stuff. This is kind of what the world is like. So maybe that actually did happen. I don't know. Do you think that happened? Gandhava coming down singing a love song to the Buddha? I think it may have happened. I don't know. The world is full of weird things like that. Anyway, the Buddha comes out. What does the Buddha do? Tell him off, right? Don't sing love song to the Buddha. No, that's not what the Buddha does. This is kind of interesting. The Buddha doesn't tell people off. That's not how the Buddha works. Actually, sometimes he does a little bit. He can be a little bit stern sometimes. It's kind of interesting. But generally speaking, the Buddha is very kind of, obviously always has metta and compassion. And even when he's stern, it is always coming from the idea of compassion and helping people. And so what the Buddha says to the Gandhava is that you're singing, and your instrument, he plays the lute, the veena, and so he says, your instrument, your lute and your singing is nicely in harmony with each other. That's what the Buddha says to him. He doesn't say the content is any good, but he says the kind of the singing and the lute are in nice harmony with each other. That's kind of what the Buddha says. And then Sakka has the Gandhava has the possibility of then talking to the Buddha and says that Sakka would like to see you. Would you be happy to see Sakka? And then the Sakka has been given permission, and Sakka comes to the Gandhava comes to the Buddha to have the discussion with him. And the question that Sakka asks, he says to the Buddha, he says, why is it that when everyone in the world wants freedom from conflict, freedom from problems, freedom from war, freedom from all of these kind of things, why is it that we still live in conflict, still live in war, live with all of these kind of problems? What is the reason for that? And that is a very interesting question, because you would think that if we want freedom from these things, then we would create societies that are free of these things, if that's what we really want. So it's a really good question. We want something, but somehow we don't seem to be able to create what we want. We are still caught up in conflict, even though we actually want to be free of it. That's a very interesting question, and I always wonder why haven't more people in history asked this kind of question. It's almost like it takes the ruler of the god, someone really kind of unique, to be able to see from the outside what's going on in the human realm, and then ask him of these fundamental questions. But it's a very, very good question, and of course, because the Buddha is asked, we can expect a kind of interesting answer. Why is there conflict in the world when no one really wants it? And then the Buddha says to Sakka, he kind of takes this back stage by stage, step by step, and he says to Sakka that the reason why there is this, first thing he says, I think because of jealousy and envy is one of the first reasons he has. And why is that jealousy and envy? Because of the desire and aversion, something like that. I can't remember the exact sequence now. And he takes it back stage by stage like this. Why is the desire and aversion going back and back and back to the very root cause? And the root cause, he says, to all the violence and problems in the world is this thing called papancha sanya sanka. Papancha sanka sanya, where does it go? Can't remember now. Papancha sanka sanya, or something like that. And so what is that? And what that is, papancha is the proliferation of the human mind. It's the proliferation that arises out of craving, arises out of views, arises out of the sense of self. It's the kind of continuous kind of driving on of the mind, always seeking things in the world through craving, through views, through the sense of self. And all that papancha is ultimately rooted in one thing, the sense of self itself that we have inside of us. And so because what that means then is that ultimately all the violence in the world, all the problems in the world, they are rooted in the sense of self. And because they are rooted in the sense of self, it means that there is no end to the violence in the world, because we cannot end the sense of self on a society-wide basis. That is impossible. You can maybe end the sense of self because it is false within each one of us, but not across all society. That is impossible. This is a personal thing that we do on the spiritual path, and it has nothing really to do with society at large. And so once we see this, we understand that the idea of conflict and violence and these kind of problems in the world, they are inherent to the world because they are rooted in the sense of self. Why are they rooted in the sense of self? Well, because our sense of self is often threatened by other people. This is what you see in places like when someone invades your country. It is my country. You identify with that country. Part of yourself is somehow involved with that country. I am Australian, I am Ukrainian, or whatever it is. And because you are... when someone invades your country, they are invading you in a sense. They are somehow putting your identity in danger. You feel that your identity is kind of vulnerable because of that. And so a large part of conflict arises because our identity is somehow tied up with things in the world, tied up with all kind of things, and that identity is challenged. Then we want to defend ourselves, and conflict happens as a consequence. So that is one way that this happens, why conflict arises out of the sense of self. But it also arises out of the sense of self because the sense of self is the root cause for craving and desire. And desire and craving are the things of the world. We desire and crave for the same things. And so conflict arises because of that. And so this is a very... important finding, a very interesting finding, because it means that there is no utopia in the world. There is no final state where you will find, everything is going to be fine. You find the kind of perfect society. There is no such thing. Society will always be undermined. It will be undermined by our defilements, and the prime defilement is the sense of self, the delusion of a self. And these defilements will basically counter all the good things that we do in the world, and they will work against that, and they will destroy these things. And so for that reason, we always have to kind of fight a rearguard action to uphold our society, to try to keep it together when all the human instinct, if you like, is to kind of drag things down, because that is what craving and desires do. They tend to drag things down. So many bad things have been done in human history in the name of creating utopias. People try to create utopias, and then you get terrible things like you have in Cambodia. Cambodia is famous for the killing fields and the Khmer Rouge and these kind of things, trying to create some kind of communist utopia. And in the process, all you end up doing is killing millions of people, and you just destroy the whole country. That's really what you do. What you create is more like the anti-utopia than actually utopia. And the world is full of these kind of experiments, trying to create something which from a Buddhist point of view actually is impossible. It is impossible because the things that undermine our world are always there to create more problems, more conflict, all of these kind of things. It's always residing within each one of us. And so the answer then to overcome conflict is that we can reduce conflict by living well, by having the right kind of government, by trying to do things in a good way. We can reduce it somehow. But the final solution to conflict is only found within each one of us. That is where the solution is found. we can ourselves be free of conflict. We can live personally in harmony with the world, but the world at large, well, that is a different matter. That is something we have to escape from it. That is really the only way out, says the Buddha. So this is very, it's really kind of interesting and very profound analysis of the world by the Buddha, which you will not find anywhere else in human history. Only the Buddha has this kind of analysis, because only the Buddha has fully understood the false sense of a self. This is what makes Buddhism unique. And so because the Buddha has seen that, it means that the Buddhist teaching is unique, really, in this particular respect. There is another nice apart from the Sakkapanya Sutta and this questioning of Sakka of the Buddha, there is another nice sutta where the Buddha talks about the same problem, and this is the sutta, the Potalya Sutta, which I often teach on these retreats. And in that sutta, the Buddha gives 7 similes of the downside of the 5 sense world. You have really nice similes, and one of those similes is a simile of the birds and the piece of meat. Those of you who have come to my retreats, you will know these similes really well, because I teach them every time. But it's a beautiful simile to show again why conflict is inevitable in the world. And according to the simile, you can imagine a bird getting hold of a piece of meat. In the bird world, pieces of meat are very valuable, very hard for birds to get hold of pieces of meat. Usually they have to be happy with a worm or an insect or something like that. Or another insect, okay. It's not so interesting to eat insects all the time. After a while you get fed up with those insects. And so you get a piece of meat. It's like, yay, piece of meat, so happy. So it gets the bit that flies off. And as soon as it flies off, these other birds come after it. Hawks, herons, large birds come after this little bird. And they want to grab that piece of meat from that little bird. They want to take it out, pull it out of its claws, or pull it out from its beak, or however it's holding this thing. And if that little bird doesn't let go of that piece of meat, it's going to have a terrible fate. It's either going to die or it's going to suffer terribly because it holds on to that meat. And the only thing that little bird can do is to let go. Otherwise the hawks and eagles are going to tear it apart, because they are much stronger, more powerful than that little bird. And the idea here is that this is like the world of the 5 senses. The world of the 5 senses is the world external to us. It's the world we all share. And because we share the world outside of us, we compete over what's in that world. We all compete for the same houses, we compete for the same jobs, we compete for the same salary raises, we compete for the same partners. We compete for almost everything. That is maybe the biggest one, right? Competing for the same partner. That's a really big one. And we all and this is why we have divorces and all kind of problems and all kind of stuff happening. So at least now on retreat, you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief about that one for a while there. And so competition is everywhere. When sometimes we fight over small little silly things, and like children fighting over a piece of cake or a toy or whatever, and then we fight over the inheritance from our parents, and it's just endless. We share the world outside, and because we share the world outside, we compete over those resources. The resources are scarce. We cannot have everything we want to have. Why? Well, one reason, because there is no end to wanting anyway. You're only happy when you have the entire universe. Then maybe you are actually not even then you will be happy. And I have this theory that you kind of expanding your desires. Okay, first of all, you have a small house, then you have a bigger house, then you want a whole village, and you want a whole city. It's like the kings of old. There's a famous story in the Ratapala Sutta where the Ratapala meets the king. And the Ratapala says to the king, well, king, if you heard that some country overseas, there was lots of gold and lots of nice things in that country, would you conquer it? King says, of course I would conquer it. So one kingdom, not enough, another kingdom, right? And eventually you have the whole earth. Then you start looking out to the universe, like Elon Musk. Okay, let's go to Mars, right? Let's go and then conquer the whole galaxy. But then one galaxy isn't quite enough, yeah? So then more galaxies, and there's a few billion galaxies out there. And eventually you have the whole universe. Then what? Well, then you invent the idea of multiple universes, yeah? Because one universe isn't enough. And I think maybe the idea of the so-called multiverse is kind of came from this craving. You wanted even more. And so there is it's completely insatiable. There is no end to craving, yeah? You're building up more and more in this way, yeah? And so because of that, you start to see that the external world, there's always going to be conflict. This is the nature of that world. We are fighting over the resources. There's no end to that. And so again, it is inherent to that world. It is inherent to that reality that there will be conflict. There will be problems because craving is always going to be with us. And so what is the alternative? Well, the alternative again is to find the refuge inside. And the refuge inside, because there is no conflict, your happiness within is not going to conflict with anyone else. You're not sharing that with anyone else. That's just within you. It doesn't create conflict in the world. It doesn't create any problems. And so the inner happiness is where we find the freedom from all of these things. But actually it's even better than that. And the reason why it is even better than that is because when you find happiness within, you also understand that that happiness within, which is much more interesting than the happiness outside, that happiness within depends on how you live your life outside. It depends on living in harmony with the people outside. So if you find a refuge within and you find happiness inside, you also become a source of harmony in the world. Instead of craving in the world, instead of being in conflict in the world, instead of competing in the world, instead of having winners and losers in the world, you become the opposite. You become a force for harmony in the world, because that harmony in the world enables the inner harmony and the refuge inside. So this is the power of the spiritual path. You find a refuge within, and you become a blessing for the world at the same time. Isn't that kind of wonderful? Yeah, everything gets turned on its head. And this is the power of living the spiritual life in a good way. Yeah, it has a very uplifting kind of quality to it, and uplifting potential for the whole world. And this is what this is about. So this is here, you can see here the contrast between the spiritual life on the one hand and the world on the other hand, the external world on the other hand. And so then the Buddha sees this dart again, the dart being the dart of craving, the stuck in the heart. Very hard to see because of the subtleties of the sense of self and all of that. Very difficult to see that you have to actually give up the self, the full sense of self entirely. And then he says, when stuck by that dart, you run around in all directions. When you have craving, the craving is the slave driver, tanha dasa, the slave of craving. It makes you run this way and run that way. You run in circles, coming back to the same point, but still running when you come back to the same point. You should maybe think that, well, I'm back to the same point, maybe I should stop running. No, you take another lap and come back to the same point again. That's your next life. Come back again. Same retreat center, and going around and around in circles in this way. And so you run around everywhere. You roam around, aimlessly, without purpose, without point, just kind of wandering around without any kind of end in sight. That is the kind of the dark side of samsaric existence for you. No purpose, no end, no real kind of nowhere to go. Aimless in all directions. But when that same dart has been plucked out, you neither run around nor sink down. When you take out the dart of craving, you stop running. You stop running, but nor do you sink down. In other words, you don't get depressed or sad. You don't find aversion and negativity either. Yeah, in fact, you find the exact opposite. You find that this is where true happiness and true contentment and true meaning actually is discovered at this particular point. So that is just a little bit about the, again, idea of right view, seeing the world in the right way, taking refuge in the right place, a place where actually it is possible to take refuge. So, Attadanda Sutta, the Buddha's, what the Buddha did before his awakening here. Okay, so I guess we can carry on. Yeah, I'm always kind of afraid of covering too much, because after all of that already, wow, it's like a like a full thing. But let's kind of carry on a little bit more, because it's there to be. It's good to have a look at. You can always come back to these things at some other time. So the next one is called the worldly conditions. These are the loka dhamma. It's found again in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, the 8th chapter, the 8th book of 8, sutta number 6. And I must admit, I'm not entirely happy with this translation, worldly conditions, because to me a condition is like a cause. It's something that tends to lead to something else. It's a condition for something else. But in many cases, the word Dhamma means more like phenomenon or phenomena. Yeah, it means the phenomena of the world, worldly phenomena. So I would call this worldly phenomena. Condition is not entirely wrong. It's that it tends to be more on the side of cause, whereas phenomena is not on the side of cause. It just means the things of the world. And this is kind of, I think, more to the point in this case. So this is the difficulty of being a translator. You have to translate somehow, and you have to have certain consistency, and that means sometimes you end up with these maybe suboptimal vocabulary choices. So the Buddha says, mendicants, the 8 worldly phenomena revolve around the world, and the world revolves around the 8 worldly phenomena. Yeah, so what does that mean, revolve around? Well, it means that this is what you are interested in. The world here means something like humanity. Yeah, human beings is what is meant by this. And so human beings revolve around the worldly phenomena. This is what we are interested in usually, these things, yeah? The material things of the world, blame and praise, fame and obscurity. These are the things that really excite us in the world. So we revolve around these things. These are the things that get us from getting up. This is what gets us to get up in the morning, to craving for the things of the world, getting out there, doing these things, building up this kind of stuff. So we revolve around this. And the world revolves around them, and they revolve around the world. They are kind of always there, not far away, and the world is kind of trapped by these things. So what are these 8? And they are gain and loss, fame and disgrace, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. Yeah, so gain and loss, this refers to usually material things. Labha is the Pali word, labha and alabha. Alabha is the opposite. So material things, not for many people, material things of the world are very important. Regardless of how impermanent and unreliable they are still very important for most people. Fame and disgrace, the yasa and ayasa. Yeah, this means like having a good name in the world, having people kind of thinking that you are, great or whatever. Or the opposite, disgrace. You are a criminal. You have, you are a disgrace to humanity or whatever. Yeah, we know what these things mean. Blame and praise. blame and praise, very obvious what that means, and we all know how, we all know the feelings of these things. And the last one is pleasure and pain, dukkha and sukha, and that is mostly here relates to the pleasure and pain that has to do with the five sense world. The pleasure and pain of the senses and of being praised and being blamed. It does not refer to the pleasure and pain of the spiritual path. That's a different thing. It just refers to the worldly pleasures and pains. So these are the worldly conditions. These 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. An unlearned ordinary person encounters gain and loss, fame and disgrace, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. And so does a learned noble disciple. What then is the difference between a learned noble disciple and an ordinary unlearned person? So this is the standard kind of contrast in the suttas between the ordinary unlearned person. This is the asuttava putujjana. Putujjana means the many person. Asuttava means the one who hasn't heard. You haven't heard the teachings. You are unlearned in the Dhammas. You have no idea about Dhamma, basically. And so if you are completely unlearned, you have never heard any Dhamma, and you're kind of an ordinary run-of-the-mill person, then you are this kind of person. And the noble disciple, of course, is the disciple who understands the Dhamma. It means not just reading the suttas, but also having experiential understanding of the suttas. So everyone encounters these things. So what is the difference then between the ordinary person and the noble one? How do the noble ones deal with these issues? How do ordinary people deal with these issues? What can we learn from the noble ones, how they think about these things? This is what this really is about. So very useful, right? These are what you might call just worldliness versus spirituality. The worldly things and the spiritual things, kind of the contrast here, really. So, what do the monks reply? The Buddha says, what's the difference? And of course the monks don't dare to say anything, because it's the Buddha after all. So they say, our teachings are rooted in the Buddha. He is our guide and our refuge. Sir, may the Buddha himself please clarify the meaning of this. The mendicants will listen and remember it. Well then, mendicants, listen and apply your minds well. I will speak. A very common thing for the Buddha to say. He will ask them a question, and then they will say, please teach. We will listen and remember it. And then he says, listen and apply your minds well. I will speak. It's like he is reminding them that now comes something important. The Dhamma is vital. The Dhamma is meaningful. The Dhamma will change your life. Listen, for goodness sake. You listen to all kind of nonsense. Listen to something meaningful for once. This is kind of what he's saying to the monks. And sometimes we need to be reminded like that. Pay attention, for goodness sake. Don't. Sometimes you see people falling asleep during the Dhamma talk. And actually, I can understand that. I can have, and I don't mean because the Dhamma talks are bad necessarily. That's not really. But most people are tired in the world. You come home from a long day at work, or you'll be spending too much time on the internet and all of these kind of things, and you are exhausted after that. The internet drains your energy, right? All of this kind of stuff we do with our mobile phones or whatever is really a drain on energy, and it gets us down and what have you. And so, of course, when you finally come to a nice place and it's kind of peaceful, of course you start snoring straight away. That's kind of to be expected. And this is one of the things I like. So we teach usually on Friday nights. You can imagine Friday, that's the worst time to teach anyone, right? The end of a long week. But we always have our Dhamma talks on Friday nights at the Amaloka Center. And there's always someone at the back of the room snoring somewhere. And when I hear that, I kind of feel happy. Because someone is relaxing, someone is resting, someone is feeling at ease, right? At least they can sleep properly. Many people have problems sleeping in the first place. So I kind of feel happy when I hear that. I feel, okay, let them snore. Yeah, don't worry about it. But sometimes people kind of go and they kind of knock them on the shoulder and say, wake up. But actually, no, it's all right. And so I can see why that happens. But ideally, this is one of the nice things about coming on a retreat like this. You have a bit more time. You have the time to wake up a little bit, to let go of the world a little bit. This is kind of the beautiful thing about this kind of time and space. And so it makes it easier to focus on the teaching. So listen. Attend well. This is what the Buddha is saying here. So take it on board, because when you listen, when you take on board these teachings, then you can reflect on them later on. When you remember something, you can build it up in your mind. You can make something very, very useful out of it. So then they say, yes, sir, and then the Buddha starts talking. But actually I should say a little bit more about this, because the idea of memorizing the teachings, you don't have to memorize it so much. You just have to have a general idea of what the Buddha is talking about. But this is like the beginning of the arising of wisdom and the arising of understanding. But there's much more to it than that. You also have to reflect on these teachings. So one of the things you can do is, after hearing these teachings, is actually ask yourself, well, what do they mean? How do they apply in my life? How can I use these teachings in a good way to enhance my own spiritual practice? And when you start to ask these kind of questions, what do they really mean? That's when they start to sink in. Very often people say, death contemplation is all very well and good, but how do you do it? Well, you just know you're going to die, but how do you do that? Well, that's what you do. You just know you're going to die. That's all. There isn't much more to it than that. And the reason why it doesn't work for you straight away is because it hasn't sunk in yet. That's the only reason. It's not because there's a fundamentally different way of thinking. It's just that you need to reflect on it again and again and again. And then as you do that, these teachings become like your teachings. You understand them. And that is very different from just hearing them about them like this. Because when you understand them, you integrate them into your worldview. And your worldview is going to be a little bit different from everyone else. And because of that, it takes time to kind of integrate this. And when it gets integrated, then it becomes a force in your life, a power. It becomes something that motivates you on the path, because it becomes part of who you are. And so you hear the teachings, you remember a little bit what is going on, then you reflect on it, and after a while it becomes your view of the world. You look at the world through that lens. Whereas in the past, when someone said you're going to die, you said, whatever, I know that, no need to think about it. Now you say, wait a minute, actually there's something important going on here. There's a different way of reflecting on this, and it changes your attitude to everyday things, to what really is important, to how you treat people around you. You become a better person if you contemplate death. This is the amazing thing. You would think you become a sad and miserable person if you think about death, but no, you become a better, more happy, more balanced person in the world when you think about these things in the right way. So all of these things matter, And so if you kind of get up too quickly after a Dhamma talk and you kind of just forget about the teaching straight away, then it doesn't really have that kind of impact. It doesn't do to you what it should be doing to you. So reflect on these things. We've just been looking at this beautiful sutta about how the Buddha thought about the world before his awakening. This is what led the Buddha to become the Buddha. This is how he was transformed. These are very powerful ways of thinking. But they're not very complicated. We can all relate to this. It is not that hard to relate to. And it's surprising how very simple teachings, very ordinary ways of thinking about the world are so powerful. It's just that we need to make it deeper. We need to take it on board in a deeper way. Then it becomes very powerful. So this is what I would recommend to you. I didn't really want to get into the next sutta so much. I talked a little bit about how to reflect instead, because otherwise too much information, too many things happening here. So that is all for this morning. So please carry on enjoying yourself. Have a wonderful lunch, and we'll see you back again at 3 o'clock this afternoon.